The date stamped on this can is not an expiration date, and believing it is costs American families nearly $3,000 a year in thrown-away food. There are over 50 different date labels in the United States, and not one of them is regulated by federal law. That sell-by date was never meant for you. It was written for the grocery store, and what the USDA quietly confirmed about 100-year-old canned food changes everything you thought you knew about what is safe to eat and what needs to go in the trash. The labels on your canned goods were never meant to keep you safe. They were designed to keep inventory moving. That confusion costs the average family thousands and fills landfills with perfectly safe food. But there is one sign of spoilage that actually matters, and it is not printed anywhere on the can. In 1977, a grocery chain in the Midwest started stamping dates on milk cartons. It was a marketing move, not a law. They wanted customers to trust that the milk was fresh. Other stores copied them. Then manufacturers joined in. Within a decade, nearly every product on the shelf had a date. But here is the thing. Nobody bothered to explain then, and nobody explains now. There are 50 different date labels in the United States. Sell by, best by, use by, best before, guaranteed fresh, enjoy by, and not one of them is defined or regulated by federal law. Not one. The Food and Drug Administration leaves it entirely to manufacturers. The USDA does the same. The only product in the entire country with a federally mandated expiration date is infant formula. Everything else, from the soup in your pantry to the tuna in your emergency kit, carries a date that was chosen by a company to protect flavor, not your health. When a company stamps Best By on a can, they are telling you when the soup will taste exactly the way their recipe intended. They are not telling you when it becomes dangerous. And they are certainly not telling you that the soup must be thrown out the next day. Yet that is exactly what millions of people believe. A study by the Food Marketing Institute found that 84% of people throw away food, at least occasionally, because of the date on the package. 37% do it most of the time. The average family of 4 loses almost $3,000 a year to food they did not eat. Much of it perfectly safe, discarded because a marketing label was mistaken for a medical warning. The environmental cost is just as staggering. Americans waste roughly 133 billion pounds of food every year, nearly 40% of the entire food supply, and a significant portion of that waste traces directly back to confusion over what these stamps actually mean. The FDA itself estimates that date label confusion accounts for 20% of household food waste. But while millions panic over a stamp that has no legal meaning, they ignore the one warning that actually signals danger, and it is hiding in plain sight on every can in your kitchen, because there is a type of damage that makes canned food deadly, and the expiration date cannot warn you about it. The real danger sign is something you can see, smell, or feel the moment you pick up the can. A bulging lid, a seam that leaks, a hiss of gas when you puncture the metal, liquid that sprays out rather than pours. These are the warnings of a toxin that forms without air, without heat, and without a single clue you could detect by taste. It is called botulinum toxin, and it is one of the most lethal substances known to science. A microscopic amount can paralyze your diaphragm and stop your breathing, and the terrifying part is that you cannot see it, smell it, or taste it once it is inside the food. The only warning you get is the condition of the container. That is why health agencies hammer this one rule above all others. Never taste food from a bulging can. Never take a small bite to check. The act of tasting can be fatal. This is not theoretical. In the United States, botulism still strikes roughly 110 people every year. And here is the detail that changes how you read every date label in your kitchen. The vast majority of botulism cases do not come from commercially processed cans on grocery store shelves. They come from home-canned foods. Vegetables canned in a boiling water bath instead of a pressure canner. Improperly fermented fish, garlic stored in oil on the counter. The CDC flatly states that commercially canned foods are an extremely rare source of botulism in the United States today. The sterilization processes used in factories kill the spores that cause it. If the can is intact, the food inside is safe. So, if the safety cutoff is not the date and not even the factory seal, then what is the actual shelf life of that can of green beans? The USDA maintains a remarkably precise answer, and it is going to surprise you. Their official guidance breaks canned foods into two categories. High-acid foods like tomatoes, pineapple, and citrus fruits will hold their peak quality for 12 to 18 months. The acid in those foods naturally limits bacterial growth, but it also causes the food to react with the metal liner over time. The can itself slowly breaks down. Low-acid foods, though, those are the ones that rewrite everything you thought about expiration dates. Meats, poultry, fish, most vegetables, soups, stews. The USDA says these will keep their best quality for 2 to 5 years. But then they add a sentence that almost nobody reads. Canned foods are safe indefinitely, as long as the container is not damaged, rusted, or swollen. Indefinitely. That is not a word government agencies use casually, and it is backed by extraordinary evidence. In 1974, the National Food Processors Association tested a batch of canned goods recovered from the Bertrand, a steamboat that sank in the Missouri River in 1865. The cans had been submerged in river silt for more than 100 years. They were tested for nutrient content. They were tested for bacteria. They were tested for spoilage. The cans were opened, cultured, and analyzed. The results stunned everyone in the room. Not only was there zero microbial growth, but the food still retained a significant portion of its nutritional value. One can was 100 years old. It was safe to eat. The Canned Food Alliance maintains a database of similar findings. Cans recovered from sunken ships, cans pulled from abandoned cabins, cans stored in basements for decades. In case after case, food that was canned decades earlier showed no evidence of pathogenic bacteria if the seal was intact. The seal is the expiration date, not a number printed on the lid. But here is the part that gets almost no attention and should make every consumer furious. While the food safety science was solidifying this finding decades ago, a parallel system was being constructed. A system designed not to protect your health, but to accelerate your purchasing, and the people who built it knew exactly what they were doing. The parallel system was the date labeling regime itself, and it was not built by accident. By the 1980s, grocery chains had realized something powerful. A date stamped on a package did not just reassure customers. It trained them. It created a psychological trigger that said, "This is still good" on one side, and "this is suspect" on the other. The moment that date passed, the product became suspect regardless of its actual condition. Consumers had been conditioned to treat a marketing label as a safety switch, and the industry knew it. What they also knew was that different labels could be used to exert different pressures. A sell-by date, for instance, is not even directed at consumers. It is inventory code for store employees. It tells the retailer when to rotate stock, But you, standing in the aisle, see that date and believe it is a deadline for your own kitchen. So you put the can back, and the store loses nothing. The manufacturer gains nothing directly from an unsold can, but they gain something far more valuable. They gain a permanent perception of perishability that keeps you buying more frequently. A can that sits in your pantry for 5 years is a can you do not replace. A can you throw out because the date passed is a can you buy again next week. This is not speculation. Industry watchdogs have documented the strategy for years. In 2013, the Natural Resources Defense Council published a landmark report titled The Dating Game. It traced the origins of date labels to a milk freshness campaign and showed how the proliferation of inconsistent, unregulated labels was a feature, not a bug. A fragmented system, they wrote, guarantees that consumers will not be able to compare products accurately or store food with confidence. The confusion is the product, and it gets even worse when you follow the money upstream. Food manufacturers are not the only ones who benefit. Waste management companies benefit. Landfill operators benefit. The entire chain profits from volume. When you throw away food, you pay for it twice. Once at the register, and again through municipal taxes that fund waste disposal. In 2021, the EPA calculated that food waste represents the single largest category of material entering municipal landfills. That rotting food produces methane, a greenhouse gas more than 25 times as potent as carbon dioxide at trapping heat in the atmosphere. Your confused glance at a date stamp contributes directly to climate change. But the most infuriating number in this entire system is the one that was sitting in plain view the whole time. In 2019, the Food and Drug Administration released a statement urging the food industry to standardize on a single voluntary phrase, best if used by. The agency explicitly stated that this phrase would communicate that the date is about quality, not safety. Yet, as of today, compliance is entirely voluntary. Manufacturers can still use by, sell by, or any phrase they invent. There is no enforcement, no penalty, no federal requirement to clarify what any of these dates mean. The same agency that admits the confusion costs households thousands and drives 40% of the food supply into landfills has no power to fix it. But here is where this story bends towards something you can actually use. Because while the regulatory system remains broken, the science of food spoilage is remarkably clear and remarkably simple. And once you learn the 3 actual signs of spoiled canned food, you will never throw out a good can based on a date again. You will also know exactly what conditions make food last decades instead of months, and why the warm cupboard above your stove is silently destroying your emergency food supply right now. That is what happens next. Here are the 3 signs that actually tell you a canned food has gone bad. Number 1, the container itself. Before you even think about the food inside, look at the can. Is the lid perfectly flat, or is it bulging outward? Press down on the center. If it flexes or pops back up, that is gas produced by bacteria. Do not open it. Do not taste it. Throw it away. A bulging can is the most reliable warning sign of botulism toxin. The same applies to any can that leaks liquid when you pick it up, or any can with a seam that has split or is actively oozing. Number 2, what happens when you open it? When the can opener punctures the lid, liquid should not spray out under pressure. If it does, bacteria have been active inside. The liquid surrounding the food should be clear, not cloudy, not milky, not thick. Some sediment at the bottom of a can of beans is normal. A uniformly murky liquid that obscures the food is a red flag, and here is one most people never learn. The smell. Canned food should smell like the food inside it. If the can has been compromised, the odor will be sour, metallic in a bad way, or sharply unpleasant. Your nose is a more reliable safety tool than any date stamp. Number 3. The food itself. If the texture is mushy beyond what you would expect, if the color has shifted dramatically, if the food sloshes loosely instead of resting firmly, that suggests enzymatic breakdown that, on its own, is not necessarily unsafe. But when combined with any of the previous signs, it confirms that the can should not be consumed. Here is the key that ties all of this together. If the can is intact, the lid is flat, the liquid is clear, and it smells normal, the food is safe regardless of what the date says. That is not my opinion. That is the position of the USDA, the FDA, and every food safety laboratory that has ever tested century-old canned goods. Now, there is a variable that matters far more than the date, and almost more than the seal. And it is the one thing most people completely ignore: temperature. Canned food is not magic. The chemical reactions that degrade taste, texture, and nutrition continue even inside a sealed can, and those reactions have a specific accelerant: heat. The ideal storage temperature for canned food is between 50 and 70 degrees Fahrenheit. At that range, low-acid foods can remain at peak quality for years and remain safe for decades longer. But for every 10 degrees Fahrenheit, the temperature rises, the rate of chemical degradation roughly doubles. Store those same cans at 85 degrees, and the shelf life for quality drops by half. Store them above 100 degrees for an extended period, and even safety can eventually be compromised as the seal weakens and the food inside breaks down. This is why the warm cupboard above your stove is a terrible place for canned food. Every time you cook, that cabinet catches rising heat. The temperature swings can be dramatic. The same applies to garages that get hot in summer, sheds without climate control, and windowsills that catch direct sun. Damp basements add humidity, which rusts the can from the outside and eventually breaches the seal. A cool, dry, dark pantry is not a luxury. It is the difference between a can that lasts 5 years and a can that lasts your entire adult life. And that leads me to the final surprising detail. While the nutritional value does decline over many years, the biggest loss is typically vitamin C, which is heat sensitive. Minerals like iron and calcium remain stable. Protein holds up well. The food may not taste as vibrant as it did the year it was packed, but it will still sustain you. In fact, the National Food Processors Association test on those 100-year-old steamboat cans found that the food had lost significant vitamin content, but was otherwise intact and nourishing. You could have eaten a meal from the Civil War era. That is how robust the canning process actually is, and how meaningless the printed date has always been. So, when you look at that can of soup with a best by date that passed 6 months ago, you are not looking at a health risk. You are looking at a system that trained you to throw away your money. The only expiration that counts is the one you refuse to accept any longer. For 80 years, the food industry has trusted a simple mechanism. If you can convince a person that something perfectly good is about to go bad, they will pay for it again and never ask who set the timer. Every can you save from the trash is money still in your account, food still on your shelf, and a quiet refusal to participate in a system built on manufactured fear. The question is no longer how long canned food really lasts. The question is what else you have been throwing away because someone told you it was time. If this made sense to you, There is a link in the first pinned comment with something I put together specifically for people who think this way. I will see you there.